Hi, I'm Sarah Tuck from Dish Magazine, and I'm really excited to show you today how to put together an incredibly simple but absolutely beautiful and tasty dinner for six as part of the latest series in Dish Magazine called Dinner for Six. So we're going to start off today with a lovely charred green bean and nectarine salad, perfect for when stone fruit's at its absolute best at the very end of summer, start of autumn. Then we're going to make a beautiful market fish, which is quickly pan-fried with a pistachio salsa, really vibrant and gorgeous, delicious to eat. And we're going to finish with a really simple pear and ginger custard pudding with a little bit of orange zest and grated ginger in there. Extremely simple to prepare, but absolutely delicious to eat. So to kick off, we're going to start with the charred green bean and nectarine salad. And the first step of that is to make a really easy, quick pickled red onion. So I'm just going to half and thinly slice this red onion and then pop it in a bowl with a little bit of white wine vinegar and some salt. And this is a recipe that we use all the time at Dish. It gives a really lovely little acidic crunch to all sorts of dishes, and it'll work beautifully in the salad with the sweetness of the nectarines. Okay, so I'm just going to pop the red onion in a bowl and add a tablespoon of white wine vinegar. And we have a couple of different ways of making this. Sometimes, for example, I use apple cider vinegar when I'm making mine rather than the white wine vinegar. And I'm just going to add a little bit of salt to that and give it a stir so that the onion gets coated in the vinegar. And sometimes we also add to this a little bit of caster sugar. We haven't in this recipe because we're going to be adding honey when we cook off the nectarines, so they're going to be really luscious and sweet. So it's going to be lovely to have that contrast of the kind of peppery, sharp onion to cut through that sweetness. But if it's being served with something that's not quite as sweet, you can add a wee bit of caster sugar at this point too. So I'm just going to leave that to sit while we prepare the rest. So I've just chopped the stalky end off the beans and left the other end whole. You can chop both ends off if you like. I just find that kind of quite attractive in the dish when it's plated up. So I've just got a couple of tablespoons of olive oil heating in a pan. You want it to be quite hot so that when the beans hit the pan, they blister pretty quickly. You want them to have a lovely kind of charred finish at the end. So the olive oil is nice and hot in the pan. I'm just going to throw in about half of the beans to start with. You should be able to hear that nice sizzle, and season really well with salt and pepper. So here we have our beautifully charred green beans. And you can see the little bit of char that they've got there on them. And when you're cooking them, the idea is to take them just a little bit further than you think that they need to get that really gorgeous smoky kind of flavour on the outside. The other thing with these is because I cooked them in two lots, I just popped a little bit more olive oil in the pan to heat up in between so that they didn't stick to the base. But they're all ready to go. So we're going to put them to one side and I'm going to get on to cooking our nectarines. So the next step is to cut these beautiful almost ripe nectarines, and I'm going to pan fry them in a little bit of butter and olive oil and some honey. And as you can see, I'm cutting the sides off almost like you'd cut mango cheeks to avoid the stone. If you want to cut them in half and wrangle the stone out, by all means, go for it, but you might have a bit of this situation where you lose a little bit. So you just want a wee splash of olive oil and a knob of butter. Put it in the pan with a sizzle, and then I'm going to add a tablespoon of honey. And add our nectarines. Just turn them over after a couple of minutes cooking, and these are just about ready, and they look just absolutely luscious. So we're just going to let those cool for a few minutes before we do the final construction of the salad. So as Claire always says, this is one of my favourite bits. This is the final kind of putting it all together on the plate. So you can put them together obviously any way you choose, but I always like to have a kind of a little bit of a rhythm and often a kind of a bit of a swirl on the plate that I add to. So I'm going to start with my base, which is the lovely charred green beans. And then I'm going to start popping in some of these incredibly gorgeous nectarines. Oh, they just are incredible. So there we go. I've got a slightly kind of random selection, and I'm just going to top those with some of these pickled red onions. The pickled red onions are also great to serve on the side once you've got the beautiful market fish plated up as well. These colours are just absolutely incredible together. And the one last thing I've got here is 150 grams of feta, and I'm just going to crumble that by hand over the top. So I'm just going to drizzle over some of those incredibly gorgeous pan juices from cooking off the nectarine. And finish with a grinding of black pepper. Isn't that the prettiest thing you ever saw? So the main for our gorgeous dinner party today is market fish with herb, pistachio and lime salsa. It's incredibly quick and easy to make and so vibrant and zesty. Wait till you see it, you're absolutely going to love it. So to start off, we're going to make the pistachio salsa. I'm going to start with 2 tablespoons of olive oil, and we always use extra virgin olive oil in all of our dressings, and then a teaspoon of honey, and 2 cloves of crushed garlic. I don't know if you can hear any extra little sound effects today, but so far we've been wrangling grinders and rubbish trucks and what else have we had today? Now we've actually mostly just got some beautiful cicadas because we're shooting this in late summer. So there's the 2 cloves of garlic, and then the zest of a lime with my substandard needs to be sharpened zester. So we've got the zest of a lime, and now we're going to add 2 tablespoons of lime juice. And if you can't get your hands on limes, or if they're not very amenable with the amount of juice that they're giving you, you can use lemon juice. Then the only other thing we need to add to that at the moment is a teaspoon of sea salt. And I'm going to give it a good whisk, and it's not until just before serving that I'm going to add 1/4 cup of chopped parsley and 2 tablespoons of chopped fresh oregano. There's something so gorgeous about the green of pistachios, and the whole thing, once it's plated up with our beautiful salad with the super, super luscious nectarines and the vibrant pink of the pickled red onions, and then this fish which has its lovely green pistachios, the whole thing just looks incredibly gorgeous. So I'm not going to bother about getting these things like super, super, super fine, because I still want the salsa to have a little bit of texture to it. So we're going to end up with 1/2 cup of chopped pistachios, 2 tablespoons of the oregano, and about 1/4 cup of chopped parsley. I mean, one thing I have discovered for myself when I'm chopping herbs like this is if you can get them into a parcel as tight as possible before we start chopping, you're going to make your life a lot easier. And it's best to do this just before serving so that your herbs stay beautifully vibrant in the salsa. Gosh, the smell of that freshly chopped parsley even, as well as the oregano, is just absolutely gorgeous. So the final stage of this dish couldn't be any easier. I'm just going to salt and pepper the fish on both sides and then pop it in a hot frying pan with some oil and butter. A couple of minutes on each side and we're all good to go. These fish fillets are only going to take a couple of minutes to cook on each side. So what I would recommend is rather than crowding the pan and trying to get all 6 fillets in there, if you cook them 2 at a time, then just pop them on a plate and into a warm oven, because the whole cooking time is really only going to be 10 minutes. I hardly ever plate up individual portions and serve them to guests individually at the table, but this is one of the rare occasions that I would do it, because once you've put the fish on a serving platter, it can be quite unwieldy to get it off again and onto the plates. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to serve up one portion here so you can see how I do it to plate it, and then afterwards guests can serve themselves with the salad at the table. So I'm just going to put a lovely big dollop of natural yogurt on the plate. And then take my gorgeous piece of fish. And now that I've added my chopped fresh herbs to the salsa, I'm just going to run those along the fish. And some of those lovely oily juices from the salsa as well. And just because I can, because we're here and we have the time, I'm going to show you what it looks like when you've got some of those other beautiful colours from the salad along the side. So next up, we're going to make the baked pear, ginger and citrus custard pudding. And I'm just going to start by lightly greasing a 6-cup capacity baking dish. So I'm just going to give this a light grease with a wee bit of butter, and meanwhile I've got the oven preheated to 170 degrees fan bake. So all you need is 3 kind of, ideally actually a teeny bit riper than this, pears, but still kind of firm. And we're just going to peel and halve them and take the core out. And you can actually easily make this with tinned pears, which are, you just drain off. And you could actually do it with all sorts of other fruit too. I mean, that go with that kind of flavour profile with the ginger and the orange. I mean, I'd probably use, I don't know, plums. Claire, what else would you use in this?
Yeah, plums.
Yeah, plums would be gorgeous.
You could use apples, but I would soto the apples a little bit before.
Yeah, definitely.
That, because they won't have time to cook.
Yeah.
Cherries would be really nice.
Yeah, cherries would be lovely, because it has got that kind of clafouti vibe,
Yes.
haven't they? Which is like the traditionally made in France with cherries, which I've never had a clafouti made in France where they keep the stones in the cherries. It would be a bit of a fiddly business, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
So what I'm just doing is taking out the central little core with the pips in it, and at the base of the pear, so that it's nice and smooth and easy to eat. This is slightly easier if your pears are a wee bit riper, but still we can manage, we can do it. Alrighty, so we're just going to cut each pear into about half, each pear half into about 3, and pop them into the dish. And you can be kind of uniform if you want to in the way you put your pears. You could do them like a tarte tatin, where you have them all, in a circle. But I kind of like them a little bit random for this. Or you can hear the crunch of my still quite firm pears as I cut them. Never mind, they're going to be gorgeous. So that's all the pear sixths in the dish, and it's nice to have a couple kind of poking up above the surface too, so that when you pour the custard on, you can still see a little bit of texture. And the brilliant thing about this is it's just so incredibly quick and easy to prepare, and you can also serve it hot straight out of the oven when the custard's quite wet, or you can leave it to cool a little bit too until it's almost room temperature and it's a little bit more solid. So all we're going to do now is just quickly whisk the custard together, pour it over the top and stick it in the oven. Alrighty, so we've just got half a cup of plain flour and half a cup of golden caster sugar. And the golden caster sugar just gives it a slightly more kind of caramelly taste to the custard. If you can't get golden caster sugar, just use normal white caster sugar and that'll be totally fine. And I'm going to pop in 3 whole eggs and give them a jolly good whisk. Well, complete with a little bit of shell. Hang on, just one moment, caller. If anyone doesn't know this tip, who hasn't heard this tip before, the best way to get a little bit of eggshell out of anything that where you've cracked your eggs and have got a little bit of shell in it, the best thing to cut through it is actually the shell of the egg, so you can scoop it out with that and it will cut through the albumin. Albumin? I think it's like albumin? Something like that. Right, alrighty. So you want to give it a really good whisk so that you can get all of the flour incorporated and not end up with any big lumps. I think that's pretty good. And now we're just going to add in, I guess, some aromatics in the form of orange zest, ginger, and some vanilla extract. So first off, we're going to put in about a teaspoon of orange zest. It smells so delicious, that fresh orange scent. And then a flavour that pairs so beautifully with orange is ginger. And grating ginger is one of my least favourite things to do in the kitchen. I don't know why, but this ginger at this time of year is a wee bit woody too, and that doesn't make it a fun time. Anyway, we're going to persevere and grate a tablespoon of ginger into the batter. So I persevered and got probably slightly under a tablespoon of ginger in there, knowing me. And if you don't want to go to the faff of grating fresh ginger, although you should, you can actually use dried ginger. The problem is that you won't get quite that intensity of flavour and not quite the heat that you get from the fresh ginger either. It is quite a magical kind of flavour combination. So I urge you to persevere if you can get your hands on some. Okay, so I'm just adding about a teaspoon of vanilla. And maybe, because I was a bit mingy with my ginger, I should do more vanilla. Claire was just telling me that grating ginger is not a faff, and that my mandolin zesty thing is a little bit blunt. So she's probably quite right. So I mustn't call it a faff, it's a joy. Right, next we're going to put in half a cup of cream. Oh, I'm going to get a big blob stuck, hang on. Oh! So save that. Okay, so I'm just going to pour a little bit of the cream into the sink so that we haven't got, because we've already got a little bit in the jar. Just 1 second, in the bowl. Right, now that I've cleaned up my little mess, I'm just going to add half a cup of whole milk and whisk that all together. So you'll see, even though I said it was like a batter before, I mean it is, but it's thinner, so you haven't got like the thickness of a pancake batter. Okay, I'm just going to pour the custard all over the pears. Oh, and they're going to bake in that luscious orange vanilla ginger goodness. And I'm just going to sprinkle over about 1/4 cup of lightly toasted sliced almonds. And I was just having a chat with Claire off camera about this before, just checking whether we did need to use the almonds that were slightly toasted. And apparently they don't really toast up nicely, even though they cook for 40 to 45 minutes. So best to give them a little light toasting first. So I'm just going to pop this in the oven, which has been preheated to 170 degrees fan bake, and cook it for about 40 to 45 minutes, but we'll come and check it out in about 40. All ready to go. You can serve this, as I said, either quite hot or just at room temperature once it's had a chance to cool down. So I would serve this either with a lovely big wodge of vanilla bean ice cream, or as we have in this case, with some gorgeous mascarpone and whipped cream and an extra little sprinkling of the toasted sliced nuts. We've had such great feedback about our new Dinner for Six series in the magazine. I really hope it takes some of the stress out of entertaining for you next time you've got some friends coming over.